The sun rose over the African savanna, casting a golden hue on the wide-open plains. The girls of Starlight Academy were buzzing with excitement as they boarded the bus for their long-awaited field trip. They were heading to a remote wildlife reserve where they would see lions, elephants, giraffes, and the rich culture of the African heartland. Amina, the leader of the group, stood at the front of the bus, her smile radiating confidence. She was always the one to keep the group together, ensuring everyone felt included. Beside her, Zara, the quiet but intelligent girl, adjusted her glasses and scanned the landscape outside. She always had a knack for noticing things others overlooked. The air was filled with laughter as the girls talked about the adventure ahead. The excitement was contagious, and even the shyest students found themselves joining in the chatter. McKenna, an artistic and dreamy girl, leaned back in her seat, imagining the vast landscapes they'd soon be exploring. As the bus rumbled along, they passed through a small village. Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She noticed the strange stares from some of the men standing near the roadside. Their eyes lingered a little too long, and their expressions seemed too intense. She mentioned it quietly to Amina, but her friend dismissed it with a reassuring smile. "It's probably nothing," Amina said, her voice filled with optimism. "We are just overthinking it." But Zara couldn't help but feel uneasy. Still, she pushed the thought to the back of her mind. The journey was just beginning, and they had a whole world of adventure ahead of them. The bus ride continued late into the afternoon. The landscape outside grew more rugged, with towering trees and wild grass stretching endlessly into the horizon. The sun began to dip below the horizon, and the sky turned a soft shade of orange. It was a perfect evening until the unexpected happened. The bus came to a screeching halt, throwing the girls forward in their seats. Amina, who was at the front of the bus, quickly stood up, her eyes scanning the area outside. The driver, a middle-aged man named Mr. Bantu, was looking nervously out of the window. Before anyone could ask what was happening, a group of armed men stormed onto the bus. They wore masks that covered their faces, and their clothes were dark, blending into the night. The leader, a tall man with cold eyes, shouted at Mr. Bantu, demanding that he turn off the engine. The girls froze in fear, realizing they were in danger. Amina quickly motioned for everyone to remain silent. She could see the fear in the eyes of her friends, but she knew that panic wouldn't help them now. They needed to stay calm. "Don't make a sound," Amina whispered to the others. "We'll find a way out of this." Zara was watching the men carefully, noticing the leader's trembling hands. There was something not quite right about him, his voice was shaky, almost as if he didn't want to be doing. She caught Amina's eye and subtly nodded toward the man. Amina didn't speak, but she understood. This could be their chance. The leader ordered the girls off the bus and into a nearby clearing, where a small, makeshift camp had been set up. The girls were tied up and locked in separate rooms. The air was thick with fear, but Amina's determination never wavered. "We'll get out of here," she whispered to Linda, who was tied next to her. "Just stay strong." Days passed in captivity, and the girls' initial fear began to turn into something else, determination. They would not be prisoners for long. They began communicating in secret, using hand signals and whispers when the guards weren't around. Zara, who had a keen eye for detail, noticed patterns in the guards' behavior when they took breaks, how often they checked on the girls, and how many of them were stationed at any given time. One night, as they sat together in their small, dark room, Linda spoke up. Her voice was low but strong. "We need to work together if we are going to escape. We can't rely on anyone else." Amina nodded. "You're right. We start tomorrow. We'll wait for the right moment." Meanwhile, a tender romance began to blossom between Zara and McKenna. As the days passed, Zara found herself talking to McKenna more and more. McKenna's gentle nature soothed her, and she began to open up about her fears. One night, while they were lying side by side on the cold floor, Zara quietly confessed her worry about never seeing her family again. McKenna took her hand and squeezed it. "You will see them again. We'll all be free. Just believe in us." Their connection deepened in those quiet moments, and Zara felt a warmth inside her that she hadn't known before. She wasn't alone anymore. They were all in this together. The plan was set. When the guards took their usual late-night rest, the girls would make their move. Amina was the mastermind behind the escape, but she relied on the strength and bravery of her friends. They had everything ready: sharp objects, a secret exit they had found in the back of the camp, and a route to the forest where they would disappear into the night. It was the dead of night when they made their move. The girls, one by one, carefully untied their ropes. Zara led the way, guiding them through the small holes in the wooden structure. Linda was the first to climb through the secret exit, and Amina followed, keeping a lookout for any guards. They made their way through the thick trees, using the darkness to their advantage. But they weren't out of danger yet. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, and the girls knew that the men were searching for them. Their hearts raced as they sprinted through the dense forest, dodging branches and rocks. Just as they thought they were safe, the leader of the kidnappers emerged from the shadows. "You can't escape," he growled. The sounds of their captors could still be heard faintly in the distance, and the girls knew they had to act fast. As they ran, Amina's mind raced. Where was the nearest village? How far would they have to go? And would the kidnappers catch up to them? Suddenly, a sharp voice pierced the night. "They're escaping. After them." The chase had begun. The jungle was alive with the sounds of footsteps crashing behind them. The girls ran as fast as they could, but their pursuers were closing in. With every step, Amina felt the weight of their situation pressing down on her. They were outnumbered, and they were running out of time. Zara stumbled, and McKenna was there to catch her, pulling her up. "Keep going," she urged. Amina's heart raced as she turned a corner, only to find a dead end. The wall of trees stretched high above them. There was no escape. "We are trapped," Sod whispered, her voice filled with panic. But Amina wasn't ready to give up. She scanned their surroundings, looking for anything they could use. Then she saw it, a narrow gap between two trees. It was their only chance. "We can climb," she shouted. The girls scrambled, pushing through the gap and up the trees, trying to hide in the branches. The kidnappers were getting closer, but they were too far behind to see them now. Amina's pulse raced as she crouched in the tree, holding her breath. They could hear their pursuers shouting below, but they remained hidden in the thick foliage. The night seemed endless, but with each passing hour, the girls grew more certain of their escape. The chase led them to a cliff's edge. There was nowhere left to run. But the kidnappers had followed them, and the final confrontation was inevitable. Amina and her friends stood their ground, facing their captors with determination. The stakes were higher than ever before. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their future. Would they make it out alive? Would their bond be enough to carry them through this final test? The tension was at its peak as the story builds toward the final showdown. "Zara!" McKenna shouted, but before she could reach her, Linda stepped forward, swinging a sharp stick she had grabbed from the trees. She struck one of the men in the leg, causing him to stumble. The kidnappers, now enraged, circled the girls, their weapons drawn. The girls were outnumbered, but they fought with everything they had. Amina's pulse thundered in her ears as she dodged a knife aimed at her side. She grabbed the attacker's wrist, twisting it until he dropped the weapon. With a swift move, she knocked him out with a punch to the jaw. But just as she began to feel a surge of hope, a loud crack echoed through the night air. One of the kidnappers had fired a warning shot into the air, and the girls froze, the sound sending a ripple of fear through them. "Stay down." The kidnapper shouted. "You're out of your depth." The tension in the air thickened. Amina's mind raced. She couldn't afford to make a mistake now. They needed a plan, and fast. "We need to split them up," Amina shouted to the others. Zara, McKenna, head left. Linda, Sod, will go right. "Keep moving. Don't stop." The girls followed her lead, splitting off into two directions, each group heading in opposite ways through the dense forest. The kidnappers shouted in frustration, chasing after them. But in the confusion, Amina saw her opening. One of the kidnappers had strayed too far from the others, distracted by the chaos. This was her moment. Just as Amina lunged forward to take down the lone kidnapper, a familiar voice rang out behind her. "No." Amina froze, her heart skipping a beat as she turned to see Sod standing at the edge of the clearing, a look of terror on her face. Her hands were shaking, her eyes wide with fear. But it wasn't just fear that Amina saw. There was something else there, something that chilled her to the bone. Sada's eyes flicked to the kidnappers who were now approaching, and in a split second, everything clicked. The sudden hesitation in Sada's movements, the hesitation that hadn't been there before. Amina's blood ran cold. "Sod." "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sada's eyes filled with a mix of shame and fear. "I had no choice, Amina," she said, her voice trembling. They promised me my family's safety. I didn't know what else to do. I thought they'd let me go if I helped them." Amina's chest tightened with disbelief. Her closest friend had betrayed them. But before she could react, the kidnappers lunged, and Sod turned away from her, running toward them with a look of guilt and fear. The betrayal left a gaping wound in Amina's heart, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. They were still in danger. She could hear the cries of her friends echoing through the forest, the sound of their struggle mixing with the harsh commands of the kidnappers. Amina's breath came in sharp gasps as she ran toward the chaos, her mind burning with fury and disbelief. She couldn't let Soda's betrayal be the end of their journey. She couldn't let her friends' actions decide their fate. Zara was at the front of the fray, her hand clasped tightly around a makeshift weapon. Amina reached her just in time to stop her from being caught in a kidnapper's grasp. "We fight together," Amina shouted. "We can't let them take us." With a final, desperate effort, the girls fought back, pushing through their pain, their fear, and their grief. They moved as one, determined, strong, and united. The night seemed endless, but slowly, inch by inch, the girls fought their way to freedom. They had no choice but to trust in each other now, to believe that their bond could pull them through. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last of the kidnappers were either subdued or fled into the jungle. The girls stood, breathless, their bodies bruised and bloodied, but their spirits unbroken. Amina looked around at her friends, Zara, McKenna, Linda, and even Sod, who stood to the side, her head lowered in shame. "We made it," Zara whispered, her voice hoarse. "We are free." Amina nodded, though the weight of what had happened still hung heavily in the air. Sada's betrayal had shaken them, but it hadn't broken them. The bond between them all was still intact. "We've made it through the darkest night," Amina said, her voice steady now. "And we'll keep moving forward." Though they had escaped the kidnappers, the road to healing was just beginning, knowing that what they had gone through together had changed them forever. The sun was rising, casting a soft light through the dense jungle trees. The girls sat together, their backs pressed against the rough bark of a tree. They had managed to escape the kidnappers and were now in the heart of the forest, with only the sound of the wind rustling the leaves and the occasional bird call to break the silence. Amina looked around at her friends. Her heart swelled with pride. They had made it out. They were safe, for now. But the journey wasn't over. They still had to find a way back to civilization, and they were far from the nearest town. The forest was vast, and they had no idea where they were. "We need to stay calm," Amina said, her voice steady but filled with the urgency of their situation. "We'll find a way out. But we need to stick together." Sod, the calm and collected girl of the group, nodded. "Amina's right. We are stronger together. Let's take a deep breath, and then we can figure out our next move." Zara, still shaken from the escape, leaned against McKenna. The two girls had spent hours talking about their hopes and fears, and Zara couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of relief when McKenna was near her. There was something comforting about her presence, something that calmed Zara's restless heart. "Thank you for being there," Zara whispered to McKenna, her voice low but sincere. McKenna smiled softly, her eyes filled with a warmth that made Zara's heart flutter. "I'm always here. You're not alone, Zara." Their connection had deepened in those moments of silence and shared fear. They had been through something unimaginable together, and it had created a bond between them that neither of them could ignore. There was something tender in their gazes, the spark of something more than just friendship. But neither spoke of it aloud, not yet. Amina caught sight of the exchange between Zara and McKenna and smiled to herself. In the fires of adversity, she knew that love perhaps could grow even in the darkest of times. She herself had felt a similar connection with Linda, the fearless and independent girl who had always been ready to fight back. Linda turned to Amina and spoke quietly. "What do we do now? We are deep in the jungle with no map." Amina took a deep breath. "We find the nearest village. If we stick to the main paths, we might be able to find help. But we need to be cautious. The kidnappers might be looking for us." The girls nodded in agreement, and they began their journey deeper into the jungle, walking in a tight-knit group. Every step was heavy with the weight of their recent ordeal. Yet, despite the uncertainty, they felt stronger now, united by the bond of survival and friendship. As the girls continued their trek through the jungle, they kept their spirits high by telling stories, singing songs, and keeping their focus on the end goal. But as the days passed, the tension between Zara and McKenna grew palpable. They walked side by side more often than not, their hands brushing occasionally, and each time, the contact sent a ripple of warmth through Zara's chest. One evening, as the girls made camp, McKenna and Zara found themselves sitting alone by the fire, the rest of the group asleep under the stars. "I've been thinking," McKenna began, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. "About everything we've been through. It's hard to believe it's real, you know. That we're actually out here, in the jungle, fighting for our lives." Zara nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of their shared experience. "It feels surreal. Like a nightmare we're still trying to wake up from." McKenna looked into Zara's eyes, her gaze soft but intense. "I'm glad I had you with me. I don't know what I would have done without you, Zara. You kept me going when I thought I couldn't." Zara swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I feel the same way. You helped me see that I'm not weak. That we're stronger together." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. There was an undeniable tension between them, a pull that neither could ignore. Zara felt her heart race, her palms growing warm. McKenna reached out, brushing her fingers lightly against Zara's hand. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like everything in that moment. Their eyes locked, and for the first time in days, Zara felt truly seen. The fear, the exhaustion, the pain, all of it seemed to melt away in the warmth of their connection. "Zara," McKenna whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of the crackling fire, I think I've been falling for you." Zara's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this, but now that it was out in the open, it felt right. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. She took a deep breath and reached out, her hand trembling as she touched McKenna's. "I think I've been falling for you too," Zara replied softly, her heart racing with emotion. The moment felt timeless, as if the universe had paused just for them. The world around them disappeared, and in that moment, all that mattered was the bond they shared. Danger, and loss, and through it all, they had survived. After days of travel, the girls finally emerged from the dense jungle into a small village. The villagers, who had heard about their ordeal, welcomed them with open arms. It wasn't much, just a few humble huts and a community of warm-hearted people, but it was safety. The girls were exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but they felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The village leader, a kind man named Kofi, greeted them with a smile. "You are safe now. The journey you've been through is one of great courage. We will take care of you." The girls were given food, water, and a place to rest. Amina felt a deep sense of gratitude for the villagers' kindness. They had been through so much, and yet, they were still alive. It was a victory in itself. As the days passed in the village, the girls began to heal. They rested, shared their stories, and laughed together as they reclaimed pieces of their old selves. Zara and McKenna spent more time together, exploring the village and talking about their hopes for the future. Their relationship blossomed, and it felt like a promise that they would never let go of each other. After a week in the village, the girls were finally able to make contact with the authorities. The local police arranged for them to be transported back to the city, where they could reunite with their families. As the bus drove away from the village, Amina looked out the window, her heart filled with a mixture of relief and sadness. The journey had been long, and it had changed them all in ways they couldn't yet understand. But they were stronger now. They had faced fear, danger, and loss, and through it all, they had survived. Zara and McKenna sat close together, their hands intertwined. They had found something beautiful in each other amid the darkness, and they knew their love would only grow stronger in the days to come. Amina turned to Linda, who had become her closest ally in the battle for survival. "We made it," she said softly, her voice filled with pride. Linda nodded, her eyes shining. "We made it, and we'll carry this with us, always." The bus rolled on, carrying them back to safety, but the memories of their escape, their courage, and the bonds they had formed would stay with them forever. Zara and McKenna sat close together, their hands intertwined. They had found something beautiful in each other amid the darkness, and they knew their love would only grow stronger in the days to come. Amina turned to Linda, who had become her closest ally in the battle for survival. "We made it," she said softly, her voice filled with pride. Linda nodded, her eyes shining. "We made it, and we'll carry this with us, always." The bus rolled on, carrying them back to safety, but the memories of their escape, their courage, and the bonds they had formed would stay with them forever. The bus rumbled down the dusty road, the soft hum of the engine the only sound in the still air. The girls sat in a quiet circle, each lost in their thoughts. The world outside seemed so different now. After weeks of uncertainty, fear, and survival, they were heading back to the city, the familiar, bustling world that once felt so ordinary, yet now felt like a distant dream. Zara's head rested against the window, her thoughts drifting between memories of the jungle and the new life she was about to return to. The touch of McKenna's hand in hers, the warmth of the sun on her face, and the sound of laughter shared between friends, it all felt so surreal. McKenna, too, sat beside her, occasionally glancing at Zara. Their connection had deepened beyond words, and every moment spent together now felt charged with an unspoken promise. Despite the horrors they'd faced, they'd found something beautiful in each other, something that made the pain bearable. "I can't believe we are actually going home," Zara murmured, breaking the silence. "It feels like a dream." McKenna squeezed her hand. "It's not a dream. We made it through. And we'll carry each other through whatever comes next." Zara smiled softly, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, McKenna. For everything." "Always," McKenna whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You were my strength when I thought I had none." When the girls finally arrived in the city, they were met with overwhelming emotion. Their families were waiting at the station, faces filled with worry, joy, and relief. The sight of familiar faces brought tears to their eyes. They had made it. They were home. Amina's mother rushed forward, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "Amina, I thought I'd lost you," she said, her voice trembling with both fear and joy. Amina hugged her tightly, her heart aching with the weight of their journey. "I'm home, Mama. I'm here." As the girls reunited with their families, there was a mixture of joy and sorrow in the air. Though they were safe, the trauma of their ordeal would not disappear overnight. The journey home had been long, but the real challenge was yet to come, the healing. Zara's parents were waiting for her with open arms. Her father lifted her off her feet, his strong arms wrapping around her in a bear hug. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Zara clung to him for a moment, overwhelmed by the love and comfort she felt in his embrace. "I'm so sorry for worrying you." Her mother, with tears in her eyes, kissed her forehead. "You're home now. That's all that matters." For McKenna, the reunion was just as emotional. Her parents stood together, their faces filled with both joy and concern. They enveloped her in a group hug, their voices a soft murmur of relief. "I'm glad you're safe," her father said, his voice cracking with emotion. "But I don't know what I would have done if I'd lost you." McKenna smiled through her tears, squeezing their hands. "I'm here. We all are. And we are stronger than we were before." In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to return to some semblance of normalcy. The girls attended therapy sessions to help them process the trauma, but they leaned on each other through the difficult moments. They shared their fears, their hopes, and their dreams, growing closer with every conversation. Amina found peace in the comfort of her family, but she also couldn't shake the memory of the people they had left behind in the jungle. She thought often of the villagers who had helped them, and she began to organize efforts to provide support to their community. Amina's sense of responsibility grew, knowing that the courage of her friends had been fueled by the kindness of strangers. "I want to give back," Amina told Linda one evening as they sat together, reflecting on their journey. "We owe it to them." Linda nodded in agreement. "We owe it to ourselves too. We've come this far, let's make a difference." Meanwhile, Zara and McKenna spent more time together, quietly navigating the blossoming relationship between them. Every day, their bond grew stronger, and the tender moments they shared were filled with understanding and love. There were no words to describe the connection they had forged in the heat of the jungle, but the love was there, undeniable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Zara and McKenna walked hand in hand through the park. The city felt more alive now, more vibrant, and their steps felt lighter. "I never thought I'd be walking here again," Zara said softly. "After everything, I thought I'd never see the world the same way." McKenna smiled, squeezing her hand. "But you do see it differently." "We both do. And now, we have each other." Zara's heart fluttered, and she turned to face McKenna. "I love you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. McKenna's eyes sparkled as she gazed back at her. "I love you too. With all my heart." They stopped walking and faced each other, the world around them fading as they leaned in for a kiss, gentle, tender, and full of promise. It was a kiss that spoke of everything they had been through and everything they would be in the future. Together. Months passed, and the girls returned to their normal lives, but they carried the strength of their experience with them. They had learned that they were capable of more than they ever imagined. They had survived the impossible, and now they were ready to face whatever came next. Amina, ever the leader, began organizing charity events to raise awareness for the people of the village that had helped them. She spoke at local schools, encouraging young people to follow their dreams and never give up, no matter the challenges they faced. Lindayo and Sod worked together to support the survivors of the kidnapping, using their experiences to help others find strength in their own struggles. Zara and McKenna, their bond stronger than ever, worked alongside Amina in their efforts to give back. They traveled together, speaking to communities, sharing their story, then spreading hope. As they stood together on a stage, speaking to a crowd of eager young faces, Amina looked around at her friends, her family. The girls had come so far. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, united by the love, courage, and resilience that had carried them through. And as the sun set on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the world, they knew that their journey was far from over. Together, they could conquer anything. Years later, the story of Amina and her friends would be told to future generations. The legend of the 20 girls who survived the jungle, who fought for their freedom, and who found love and strength in each other would inspire countless others. It would be a story of courage, of hope, and of the unbreakable bonds that tie us all together. And for Amina, Zara, McKenna, Lindayo, and the others, the journey was just the beginning.